Today's lesson is going to be problem 12-6B. Again, in 12-6B, we're going to be doing a statement of partnership liquidation. On August the 3rd, the firm of Chappell, Rock, and Pryor decided to liquidate its partnership. The partners have capital balances of $14,000, $102,000, $86,000, respectively. The cash balance is $65,000, and the book values of the non-cash assets total $167,000, and liabilities total $30,000. The partners share income and losses in the ratio of 1, 2, and 2. So again, what we would end up doing in these ratios is adding up all of the numbers here. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2 more is 5. So 1/5 is going to go to Chappell. 2/5 is going to go to Rock, and the remaining 2/5 is going to go to Pryor. That's the way they share profits and losses. So we're going to prepare a statement of partnership liquidation covering the periods from August the 3rd to the 29th for each of the following independent assumptions. So we first have to start with the balances before we sell off any of our assets or we pay any of our liabilities. Remember, we're liquidating this partnership, which means we're going completely out of business. So what we have to know is what we have in the balances of our ledger accounts before we go out of business. So our cash account has a balance of $65,000. Our non-cash assets have a book value of $167,000. Our liabilities total $30,000. Chappell Capital has a balance of $14,000. And Rock has a balance of $102,000. And Pryor has a balance of $86,000. These are our beginning balances. These are the balances that are in the ledger account right now. These are the balances before we start the liquidation process. In Part A, it tells us that all of the non-cash assets are sold for $217,000. So $217,000 is going to be debited to our cash account, or we're going to increase our cash account by $217,000. I'm going to pull my calculator up here because I want you to see that when we sold the non-cash assets for $217,000, that was more than what they were worth. So this time we had a gain on the sale of the assets. The gain on the sale will be divided between the partners according to the way they share profits and losses. So because our cash that we received was $217,000 and the value of our non-cash assets was $167,000, we sold those non-cash assets and we realized a gain of $50,000. Of that gain of $50,000, Chappelle would get 1/5 of that. So we would multiply the 50,000 times 1 and divide it by 5, and that will give us the amount that Chappelle would get. They're going to get 10,000 of the 50,000. Rock's capital balance would be 50,000, the gain, times 2/5, which would give you 20,000 as his share of the capital balance. Fryer also gets 2/5, so he would also get 20,000. Because this is a gain, these are going to be added back to the partner's previous balances. That was different than the one that we completed yesterday, which was problem 12-5B. In 12-5B, there was a loss on the sale of assets. In this problem, there is a gain because the amount that we received in cash from the sale was more than the value of the assets. You still divide it by the way they share profits and losses. This gain will be divided according to the way they share profits and losses, and it will add back to the capital accounts. So my non-cash asset, I should put here, is decreased by 167,000 to get this in balance. So technically what you did is your cash was increased by debiting it for 217,000. We credited the non-cash assets for 167,000. And these differences are credited to each one of the partners' capital accounts. That's what the journal entry would look like, even though they did not ask you for a journal entry. Also, to make sure that you get all the points for this problem, put a 0 in for any blanks that you don't record anything in. After you sell the assets, you want to determine the new balances of the accounts. So my cash account beginning balance before this liquidation was 65,000. We're going to add to it 217,000 in cash that we received from the sale of the assets. The new balance in the cash account is $282,000. Our non-cash assets would have a 0 balance now. Our liabilities still have 30,000 in them. And our capital account for Chappelle is 24,000 now. And for Rock, it's 122,000. And then for Pryor, it is 106,000. The next step is that we're going to pay our liabilities. The liabilities amounted to 30,000, and we have enough cash to do that. We're going to decrease our cash or credit our cash for 30,000, and then we will debit our liabilities or decrease our liabilities by 30,000. Again, I'm going to put zeros in for anything we don't do anything to on this particular transaction. Then we are to determine the balances after realization. My cash had a balance of $282,000. I'm going to subtract from it $30,000 that we paid for our liabilities. That leaves me with a cash balance of $252,000. Notice this time none of the partners had a deficiency, so the remaining cash is given to the partners according to what they have left in their capital balances. So the journal entry would have credited cash for $252,000. It would have debited the capital for Chappelle for $24,000. It would have debited the capital balance of Rock for $122,000, and for Pryor it was $106,000. Now these are debits, so you have to put minus signs in front of each one of them. We're debiting our capital balance. We're reducing the capital balance completely off of our books. And we've given each partner the capital balance in cash. So in other words, the partners are going to pocket $24,000, Chappelle would, and Rock would pocket $122,000, and Pryor would pocket $106,000. And we're through with our partnership. And so all of the remaining balances should be zero now. In B, they're giving you a whole different problem. It's a what if. So the difference is basically, what if the non-cash assets are sold for $72,000 and the amount of the non-cash assets is $167,000. So this time there would be a loss on the sale. We're going to start with the balances before realization. They will be the same balances that we started with before in the last part of this problem, or all of these balances were given. We're going to sell our assets. This time in part B, it tells us that we're going to sell them for $72,000. So our cash is going to increase by $72,000. Our non-cash assets are going to decrease by $167,000. In other words, we credit the non-cash assets. And we need to determine the amount that we lost. We got cash of $72,000, but the assets were actually worth $167,000. So this time there's a loss of $95,000. So Chappelle would share that loss at 1/5 of that. So we multiply this $95,000 times 1 and divide it by 5, and that would mean that Chappelle would be losing $19,000 in their capital balance. Rock's was 2/5 the remaining balance. Again, we received cash of $72,000 less the non-cash assets of $167,000, leaves us with a loss of $95,000. We would multiply it this time by 2/5, which would give you a negative $38,000. That would be Rock's share. Since Pryor's is also 2/5, Pryor's would also be a negative $38,000. And again, put zeros in for those blank boxes. Then we're going to have to determine the balance after the realization. So for your cash, they had a beginning balance of $65,000. We're going to add the $72,000 that they sold the non-cash assets for, and that gives them a total cash balance right now of $137,000. The non-cash assets are zero balance now. We still have $30,000 in liabilities that we owe. And you can see here that this has become, for Chappelle, a negative balance. So 14,000 minus 19,000 means that Chappelle has a deficiency that they owe the partnership of $5,000. For Rock Capital, the balance was $102,000. We're going to subtract $38,000 from that, and that's going to leave you with $64,000. For Pryor, the beginning balance in his capital was $86,000. Now we're ready to pay our liabilities. The liabilities were $30,000. And that will be a negative $30,000 because when we pay out our liabilities, our cash would be credited. Our liabilities would also be reduced by $30,000, which would have been a debit to the liability account. And then we would bring these capital balances forward. Oh, sorry, got off on the wrong line there. Let me take that back out of there. We wouldn't have done anything to the capital balances. And now we would rebalance. So your cash now has $107,000 in it. Your liabilities are going to have a balance of zero. Your capital for Chappelle is still a negative $5,000. And the remaining partners, we just bring their balances down as they are. All right. It says there's been a receipt of the deficiency, so evidently Chappelle has paid the amount of $5,000 to the partnership. When you receive a deficiency, you're going to add $5,000 to the cash account. We debit cash, and then we would credit the capital account, which would make it reduced down to zero. But we're going to put 5,000 in there as a positive number. The balances now oh, you're not subtracting here, you're adding. So sorry. So it's 112,000. Should have added that balance. All right, then we're going to distribute the cash, which means we're reducing our cash down to zero. So we're crediting the cash for 112,000. And we're going to pay capital, pay Rock 64,000, which will reduce his capital balance to zero. And then we're going to pay Pryor 48,000, which will reduce his capital balance down to zero. So all the remaining balances now should be zero. All right, in part two, they got another what if analysis that's relating to what we had recorded in part B. It says, assume that the partner with the capital deficiency in part B declares bankruptcy and is unable to pay the deficiency. So Chappelle is not going to be able to pay this 5,000 like he did to the partnership in the previous example. But we have to get rid of Chappelle's capital account balance because we are liquidating this partnership. And what we're going to do is we're going to make Rock and Pryor pay for the deficiency that Chappelle could not pay for. In other words, we need to reduce that negative $5,000 capital balance of Chappelle off of our books. And to do that, what we have to do is credit Chappelle capital for 5,000. What that's going to do is that's going to make this negative 5,000 go away when we credit it. It's like we're adding to this account and bringing it back up to zero. So Chappelle capital account is closed out. Since he was unable to pay the deficiency because he declared bankruptcy, the other partners would have to share in the profits and losses of that deficiency according to the way they share profits and losses. And you can see that the other two partners' capital accounts were equal. So each one of these partner capital accounts will be reduced. The Rock capital would be reduced by half of 5,000. And prior capital will be reduced by half of the 5,000. So this is the journal entry that we would make to allocate the partner's deficiency to the other partner's capital accounts. What that will do is that will change the capital balances of Rock and Prior by 2,500. So the remaining balances for Rock was 64,000, and then we got to subtract out the 2,500 that was debited to his account. His remaining balance will be 61,500. When we're distributing the cash, we would need to debit Rock Capital for the remaining balance, which is 61,500. For prior capital, the balance was 48,000. And then he had to be reduced by 2,500 for his share of the partner's deficiency that the partner could not pay back, which was 2,500. We're going to subtract 2,500 from the 48,000, and his balance now is 45,500. So prior capital is going to be taken off the books at 45,500. That would be his capital balance with the split of the partner's deficiency that the partner could not pay back. We're going to credit the cash account by the entire amount of cash that would be remaining. So our cash after the payment of the liabilities was 107,000. So that balance would be distributed to the partners. And if we add up our debits, that will equal 107,000 that was credited to cash account. And so that's how you would do a statement of partnership liquidation and the what if analysis for this particular problem. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to also stop recording. And we'll see you next time.